Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I will give you all a few minutes to get in and get settled, and then we will kick off day 3, and I will introduce you to our panelists for today. I will give it about 2 minutes here, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, our room is filling up pretty quick, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started this morning. As you all may know, I am Kris Worrells. I have been with you all the last 3 days, and I'm excited to be with you today. Today we have Dominique Jones, we have John Haines, and we have Keith Baker, who will be our panelists for today. We want this session to be interactive. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to be at home, so feel free to chime in. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our team to introduce themselves, and I'll come back with some questions for you all. I'll let you guys take it away.
Great, thank you very much. I guess I've been kind of charged with kind of setting the stage a little bit, but let me start off by just introducing myself. I'm Keith Baker. I'm the managing director for Reconnect Rondo. I'd like to thank the center for, allowing me to be a part of this this dialogue. It's an important dialogue. Reconnect Rondo is an organization that's leading or moving forward to lead a restorative movement around ending racial disparities in Minnesota. One of the things that's important, and more specifically to that, the community of Rondo that existed from as early as the 20s into the 50s was destroyed by the freeway I-94 coming through. Certainly, Rondo was not unique in that regard, but certainly that was the case. There's a contemplation right now of creating an African-American enterprise district. But in order to do that, land must exist. And so the idea is to create a cap or a lid over the freeway. So one of the things that I hope to add to this discussion here today is talking a bit about models, community land trusts, looking at the loss and how to bring back that gain of that lost. And I'm really excited to be a part of the panel discussion.
All right, I'll jump in. So my name is Dominique Jones. I am the program director at the City of Lakes Community Land Trust. It's one of the largest land trusts in the United States. We now have over 321 homes under trust and have been able to help 415 homeowners in just the city of Minneapolis. Now we are moving into commercial land trust, which is a new phenomenon, and trying to help business owners, particularly business owners of color and African-American business owners, to acquire commercial real estate and build equity through their business and acquisition of commercial real estate. And so I'll be focusing in on the commercial land trust side of things, and I'm happy to be here with you all today.
I'll jump in. Thanks, Dominique, and it's great to be with you and with Keith. I'm John Haines. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I think we've got people on the call. We're not seeing the full view, but I hope there's people around the country. But it's fun to be with Minnesota friends here. I run the Community Investment Trust out of Portland. I'll explain more about that, I think, during the course of this. But I'll tell you the website that has a load of information and videos and background on us is investcit.com. I'm executive director and founder and conceiver of this Community Investment Trust. We have a successful pilot where we just had our annual board meeting yesterday and declaring 9.3% dividends again for the 3rd year, and a share price change that's gone from $10 over the course of 3 years to, we'll announce it to our investors at an investor dinner, to $17.05. These are all investors that by and large have never invested, don't have a stake in the neighborhood outside of their rental house, people of color, refugees, immigrants that are on a new path, a long-term path for building family wealth. But it's great to be with you all.
So I can ask a question that we want to start off with just to get to know each other a little bit better. The question is, in light of the Thanksgiving holiday that just passed, what are you most grateful or thankful for? And I'll start. So I'm very thankful for my family. We are all quarantining together, but we are all healthy. And so that is something, now that I really, am grateful for. And I'll get to see my mom in a week next week. And so she lives in Arkansas now. And so I haven't seen her in a while. So that'll be nice. And I'm grateful to see her and that she's in good health as well.
Great. Well, I don't mind jumping in because I was born on Thanksgiving, except for it was the 27th rather than the 26th. So I've made it another year. So I'm thankful for that. Certainly, it's been a bit of a challenge. Ordinarily, I'm the big cook or smoker for the family, up to 30 people, 40 people. So I missed doing that during this holiday season. But I certainly am thankful that family is doing well, and thankful that I'm able to be here, having now hit another birthday mark.
Gosh, I'm thankful for quite a few things, actually. One, just looking out my window here, I'm grateful that I've in isolation that I've got a yard with birds and a place for my dog to go. So it's not as it's better working from home than it is in a cubicle downtown. So I'm thankful for that.
Right. Yeah.
We have a couple comments coming in through Crowd Compass. We have one that says, I'm thankful for family and friends. We have another one that says, I'm thankful to still be employed. We have a third that says, I'm thankful just to be still alive in 2020.
Great. Let me, if I can, just kind of jump in a bit more and kind of give you a little bit of the background on the Rondo story. I recognize that John and Dominique are both focused in the commercial space, but I want to set the tone of community land trusts also and their use and the focus around affordable housing. So let me just jump in to do this. I'd indicated that Reconnect Rondo is an organization leading a restorative movement to end racial disparities. More specifically, we're trying to reignite an African-American enterprise district that's connected to a land bridge, the creation of 15 acres, which currently is a blank canvas. And so to give you a little bit more background, 80% of the city of St. Paul's African-American community lived in Rondo during the 50s, and it was the social, cultural, and economic fabric of the community that was ultimately destroyed by I-94. It took 700 homes and 300 businesses. Let me quantify it just a little bit for you so that you get a sense of what I'm talking about and why this discussion is so important around community ownership. So just think about it. Intergenerational wealth loss, given the taking of the 700 homes, if we snapshot to 1980, 2 sales cycles of homes in the area similar to those taken, it brings about an intergenerational wealth loss of $35 million. Another way to understand the impact is, again, in 1980, that amount of money could have paid for 4,800, correct, 4-year college degrees at the University of Minnesota. That's a college degree opportunity for 1 of 3 children who reside in Ramsey County and every Black child between the age of 10 and 24. So it's a significant impact. And so the proposition that we lead forward with for Rondo is making sure that we capture back land that was taken. We restore that to include all of the social, economic, environmental benefits that were once there, but we've got to find tools and mechanisms that allow it to emerge in a scalable way, leveraging this asset, if you will, that currently doesn't exist. So we're doing our planning ahead of the curve in order to make sure that we're getting it right and that we get the kind of outcomes that are really going to be beneficial. Again, not only around housing affordability, but also about commercial land and commercial space and overall planning and programming. So I set that stage because I'm very interested in the models that both John and Dominique have been a part of leading, and more specifically interested in dialoguing also the housing piece, and hopefully I can raise some interest in that regard. So thanks so much for, again, allowing me to kind of set that tone for us all. And I'm wondering whether or not, Dominique, you'd like to kind of pose the question internally to us, or whether or not we should just go ahead and jump in and talk a bit about our views around community land trusts and the commercial work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I can pose a question and we can kind of do both.
Okay.
So discuss how land trusts help efforts to build economic power within a community.
Keith, that's your expertise. I can
Well, I'll
frame it a little
here-
different.
yeah. I see how it gets passed on here, see?
Yes.
All right, so here's what I can tell you. We've got a number of organizations in Rondo. Community development corporations like NDC, Aurora St. Anthony. We have the Rondo Community Land Trust itself, which currently has about 15, I think as of 2016, has about 50 properties in its arsenal of resources. It was founded in 1993. The model that they use in this, and I think it's probably fairly unique, although there are a lot of different types of models that certainly are out there, is a model that allows the owner of the property, if you will, or of the house, to reap the benefit upon sale. Not all models do that. Some models cap the transaction upon sale or the entry point. But for the Rondo Community Land Trust, it's very, very different. The other thing that I think is also important to recognize in terms of the benefits, and this is something that is quite evident, is that what ends up being important is also how to integrate both commercial space and affordable living. And I know that the Rondo Land Trust today is really trying to emerge in this space to figure out how that can happen in a really responsible and important way. But one of the things that I wanted to at least share is that how I got into this was really around trying to fix a procurement problem. And so it's a long ways from housing affordability or community land trusts as mechanisms for improving community. And I'll give you just the brief snapshot so you know kind of what brings me to the table. While the US Bank Stadium was emerging, I was organizing small architect and engineering firms. And I was simply trying to make sure that they had access to the opportunity. A portion of the work got attached to a private development project because the Sports Facilities Authority could not afford the complete design and build of the proposition that was put on the table. When a portion of it got attached to the private development, the procurement opportunity for the businesses I had organized got lost. And I was curious, how can public resources, tools, and resources be used for private development, yet there's no real opportunity for procurement opportunity? So I started thinking about a financing model that would allow interaction with community land trusts that was public, private, philanthropic, and also people driven in terms of inputs and investments. Now, when we think about community land trusts at a certain level, there are benefits and there are limitations. And some of that has to do with the nature of the colors of the money that are used, okay, in bringing a proposition forward. So I see that the mechanism that I began to think about could have a very, very important interaction relationship with community land trusts. So it's really about scalability for me. There's an opportunity, but how do you scale it? And how do you scale it in the context of a blank slate where land doesn't exist, so that you can leverage all the different money streams and make those transactions happen a little bit better. So that's how I got to the table. That's how I see the link with community land trust today. Again, it's not my area of expertise, but I certainly have a sense of how it's financed, how projects emerge, and also some of the challenges and benefits with respects to gain to homeowners upon sale, and those models that don't allow for those things to take place as well.
So it looks like a question came through. Please explain the term colors of money.
Okay, so what I mean by colors of money is, again, public, private, philanthropic, okay, federal versus local, state. There are rules around each of these in terms of procurement, okay? And so there are also rules around them in terms of transactional monitoring of rules and laws, tax laws, security laws, all these other things that factor in. A nonprofit entity, which is usually community land trusts, also have to use a wide range of these resources and tools. And so the colors of money really have to do with the characteristics of the money, the source of the money, and the rules that regulate those resources.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Color money is a great term for the various flows. It's also a terrific book about the Black banks and the racial wealth gap that came out 2 or 3 years ago. And I'm sure a lot of people on this call have heard of that. You know, when I think of the flow of funds and the color of money with respect to the range of things that communities that I'm talking with around the country want to accomplish, from maintaining affordability, and that tends to be the role of community land trusts, and taking the cost of the land out and putting some predictability to the future affordability. With respect to the community investment trust, we see a compatibility, and particularly in high cost real estate markets. So Bay Area, for sure, bigger urban cities that are very unaffordable. Minneapolis happens to be not entirely unaffordable. Same with Milwaukee, St. Louis, places like that. But some of the other cities are just too expensive to do affordable housing, without a community land trust, particularly individual housing, and even a community investment trust. The opportunity to partner with a community land trust to take the cost of the land out of it and put some measure of affordability into the commercial retail space over time is really important. One thing, I'll stop there, but one thing that may be helpful for people when they start to look at the different range of options for affordability, community development, housing, co-op space, REITs, community investment trusts, et cetera, is a matrix that we collaborated with the 4 big think tanks over the last couple of years, and have kept aggregating 20 something, close to 30 different entities, products that we put into a matrix with all the names across the top and then their attributes on the side. And it's an interesting way to sort the options when you have a community come together of what do we prioritize and who's going to be the lead for maybe the co-op workspace, the accelerator space, the housing, the CIT, and each lead organization is kind of focused on the flow and color of money to get their particular part of a more comprehensive plan for a neighborhood initiated or restarted.
I'll jump in and kind of talk about the commercial land trust and how we're trying to, build economic power within the community. So the City of Lakes Community Land Trust, it's created a program called the Commercial Land Trust Initiative. And this is a pilot that is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with the intentional focus in North Minneapolis. And once we get beyond the pilot phase, we do plan to break off as a separate entity. And that way we are able to expand beyond the geographical borders that we have right now set in place. And so the pilot is intended to demonstrate the need for and viability of using the community land trust mechanism to preserve the availability as well as the affordability of community-owned commercial space. So again, this is a new concept. It's worked very well in the residential, but now we are seeing that there is a need in commercial space as well. So neighborhoods, we believe, are a reflection of the economic, cultural, and social wealth of a community. And so neighborhoods where Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, known as BIPOC, owned businesses can grow and thrive. Residents then can claim spaces through decision-making, power, and ownership of land, and are building a vibrant, human-centered economy. And so that's what we're thriving for. Community ownership of land gives the community control over what types of businesses can operate on top of that land. So if the community doesn't want another liquor store or a check cashing business there, they now have the power and the influence over such decisions. The Commercial Land Trust also intends to provide gap funding to Black businesses, which is our primary focus right now, that want to purchase commercial real estate in Minneapolis. And the reason we are focusing our efforts on the Black community is because this group has some of the largest economic as well as other disparities in Minnesota. And within Minnesota, the largest within the country. And with recent events such as COVID-19 and the events of that followed the murder of George Floyd, this group has been placed at an even greater economic disadvantage. And so through ownership of commercial real estate, this can provide a business owner with security from gentrification or displacement, which we're starting to see now along Lake Street corridors and West Broadway corridors. And it is also economically more affordable to own than to rent, and a way to build equity through that. And so that's what we're trying to achieve through this. We're still in a pilot phase, but I'm really seeing this going very far in the near future.
You know, one of the things that I'm curious about, I mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, the article, The Problem with Community Land Trusts. And while I'm certain that we're seeing a lot of really positive outcomes to it, and again, as someone who's an observer and also someone who's interested in various models, you know, the article really focused in on really bringing to light kind of this housing movement, and acquiring and administering property. And she states that it should not be a housing movement only kind of goal. That it really has to be an advocacy for affordable housing, coupled with kind of bottom-up control by residents. And I think that's a little bit of what I heard you say, Dominique, to a large extent. You know, for the Rondo project, certainly we have a lot of layers because we're dealing with a lot of issues, not just housing, but also business incubation, control of land and ownership, et cetera, et cetera. But I was really intrigued by that article because I know that a lot of land trusts are emerging as real important hot topics. But I also see the challenge because it's being driven by an affordable housing movement that may not be as connected to neighborhoods and communities that they ought to be. And one of the things for us is we've got to make sure that we articulate for Rondo, this is a blank canvas. And so the community has got to be, if you will, the planner, the master planner. And by allowing communities to be master planners, then they get to determine not only what lays out on this new canvas, but also how the benefit returns to them as owners of this space. And I'm curious myself from my colleagues here, John, or yourself, you know, your further thoughts about kind of this movement and this housing affordability versus maybe the space that you all are in, which is really around the community and business owners or commercial side of the equation. I'm really curious about that.
Well, Dominique, I can jump in for a bit here, maybe give a slightly longer but succinct overview of the Community Investment Trust. We initiated this using human-centered design principles. Oh gosh, it could be embarrassing to say how long it took us to conceptually build this, but let's just say several years ago. And we started by going out to affordable housing, a range of places with a group of interns from a university that spoke multiple languages. And then we talked at an international farmers market to people. And we basically asked what's changing in the neighborhood what's good, what's bad, what's missing, and do you save, do you invest? And the answers were generally, the changes are happening. We feel left out. There's gentrification. We don't feel a part of it. And we need, a range of kinds of businesses they wanted, some practical, some not. A bike co-op, an art space, cool things, cool ideas. But it generated a good conversation. And we did this in multiple languages and bought pizza and daycare so everybody could come and attend. And then when we asked, do you save, do you invest? The answer was now and then, periodically we save. Invest, nobody was investing. And why not? Well, here's the list. I only have $10 to $100 a month. I don't understand investing. I can't risk losing my money. And, I just don't understand investing. I need help understanding what the options are. So that kind of set the platform for us in a neighborhood. And we looked at 4 zip codes, and the characteristics of that zip codes, 140,000 people, the majority renters, 65%, 90% of the children are on free and reduced lunch. So, poor and ethnically diverse, the high school that's close to the CIT property that we ultimately purchased, over 70 languages are spoken at home. So it's super interesting landing pad for people. It's a 50s, 60s white suburban commuter neighborhood that's transformed into, this diverse, interesting, ripe neighborhood. So then we had other meetings and we put up a couple of buildings, one dilapidated in the neighborhood and another one that was built across town as kind of a food hub and that was already built. And we put up, what about these? What if you could own these? And their eyes lit up. How? And we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's figure out a way to create a real estate investment product that fits people's needs and desires. And it took some time. There were some legal hurdles, but the key characteristics of that were of the product that we've designed is it's now a proven product and platform. And the attributes to the product itself were, again, meeting people's needs and desires. So the 5 characteristics are that it's low dollar entry. People invest $10 to $100 a month, and they buy shares in a C corporation. That's a state C corporation led by community members as board members. So it drives all the decision making into the community. It's downside risk protected. That's kind of the magic to this, that we uniquely carved a way to do this with a direct pay letter of credit from a bank that backstops both the liquidity. People can cash out anytime they want, and at no risk of losing their money. In fact, they have no risk of losing even the gain on, from some of our investors that start at $10 a share. Now it's 17 and 5. They get their money out as soon as they hit our investment portal, and with no risk. It's geographically constrained in 4 zip codes with the idea that proximity matters. People want to know the commercial retail property, which, by the way, is 29,000 square feet. We bought it out of foreclosure. It's 100% leased. The range of tenants are a handful of nonprofits: Somali American Council of Oregon, East African Holistic Health, a Latino-owned hair salon, Somali-owned taxi company, tax preparers in 3 languages, a low-cost funeral preparation place, 2 food carts, a Russian importer of lotions. So it's a real hub, and it's a real kind of ecosystem of what the neighborhood wanted and needed. The other characteristic is that that people get short and long-term returns. So we built it to be a long-term asset wealth building path for families. So most of the investors are women, 65%, but it's a family investment. Average family size is 3.5, and people are committed. People have been in it. Some of our early investors now have been in 38 months. So super sticky. Even during COVID, we paused the investment for 3 months, but we've had more investors come on in the last 6 months than we've ever had, doing it by Zoom. So downside risk protected. They get an annual dividend. Their long-term share price increases based upon the value of the property and the pay down of debt, just like owning a home. And then the key thing that we did is we created a course called Moving from Owing to Owning. And it's a requirement to get into the class, to get into the investment. And people wanted it, and people really enjoy the class. It really works on, we do it now in 3 sessions, 2 hours on Zoom. Otherwise it was like 2 weekends in a row. It's on budgeting, goal planning, the risk return of a range of investments, looking at what's a want versus a need, and a lot of peer exchange in the class of, usually 6 to 10 people on, where can I carve a little bit out of my budget to make a $10 investment or $50, $75, or $100 investment. The property itself is, I mentioned the range of tenants. It's a 1960, 62 mid-century modern building. So those have come back in favor, and it's kind of a cool building, and it's very active. We do community events, and the investors drive community events there, from arts events to a planting event and depaving. We save money by not putting water in the storm drains here. So that saves about $500 a month, which all goes straight to dividends. Doing some solar work, a welcoming of a homeless shelter next door was something the investors wanted to welcome. Instead of saying, we don't want you in our neighborhood, let's welcome you. And then impact, what we're tracking on impact. I hope I'm not going on too long here, Keith and Dominique, but this is where it gets really exciting. Number one is the performance of the building has been solid enough that it's really created commitment and upward path for folks, both on a dividend basis annually, 9.3% average now for 4 years, and share price change going up, again, from $10 to 13 something, 15.87. And then we're going to announce next week at our investor dinner, $17.05 a share. So people are sitting on, aggregating net worth built at their own direction. The snapshot of the investors, we have over 200 families, so touching 700 people. We've got room to closely double that. 98% resubscription rate, so super sticky. People are committed and they enjoy it. They recommend it to friends. That's the biggest marketing effort we do is when somebody becomes an investor, and we do the course in 7 languages now. That particularly with refugees and immigrants, they don't trust banks, they don't trust government generally. Oftentimes they've never had a bank account and don't use a computer in a lot of cases. So, their kids get them signed up on the Zoom and getting the classes set up. So it pulls the whole family along. 68% are first-time investors, have never invested. 62% women. 54% make household income less than $40,000. And 49% were born outside the United States. Majority people of color, often refugees, immigrants. And then I can talk about this later, but kind of a lessons learned when we go out to talk with other cities. We're talking with 13 cities now to do replication. So we do a feasibility study, which is really their capacity. We work with folks to build the capacity locally. So each one of these subsequent CITs is led by and initiated by a lead organization. We're wrapping up Kansas City. At the end of this call, we're going to do our final report with them. And we've been working in Atlanta, Colorado Springs, and then we'll start in Omaha at the beginning of next month. And then we've got a group that Kresge Foundation is funding us to work with in Memphis, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Fresno. And then a handful of others that are in the queue. So we're really excited to see that our little Portland model can be replicated in places where we can frankly make a bigger impact for the Black community and people of color and poorer neighborhoods. And I think we've been able to do in Portland because we're not as diverse, even close, as Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Memphis, Albany, New York, even Fresno.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. So that is kind of going into our next question. What do these models look like in different cities, and how can they be designed to ensure both racial equity and impact? And I'll just add, I've talked to a number of community land trusts who are, trying to acquire commercial real estate to put under trust as well. And I've talked to the Crescent Community Land Trust in New Orleans. I've talked to Philly Community Land Trust in Philadelphia. the 24-1 Community Land Trust in St. Louis, Missouri, Rondo Community Land Trust in St. Paul, the Champlain Housing Land Trust. And I'm going to be actually in conversations within the next week with Anchorage Community Land Trust in Australia, in Alaska, and then Oakland Community Land Trust out of California, and then the Sawmill Community Land Trust. So I've talked to a number of community land trusts, and I can tell you that each one is doing something different, a little different. And that's what I think makes it so unique from the residential side, because residential, I would say, is less complex than commercial. And there's so many different ways that you can go about this as far as building community ownership and community wealth through commercial real estate. And so they've all have done something different. And I've learned a lot about just how many different ways you can go about this.
Well, I'm kind of curious from John, both you and Dominique, because as I think about kind of the fact, again, we've got a blank canvas. And so there is not the value except for what I would term at this particular point as air rights, if you will, because the structure's got to maintain its relationship with the state, or, you know, because it's an interstate as well. But as I'm thinking about the model, it sounds like it's both for-profit and nonprofit. There are some interactions between that are taking place when you think about a community investment trust as well. Is that assumption correct?
Yes. Ultimately, what we did, we incubated it as a nonprofit, Mercy Corps, but we set up a C corporation that's owned 100% by the shareholders. Mm-hmm. We are a subordinate lender. We put in initial equity at 2%, and then we found an impact investor to put in money at 4%. That was the down payment. That was the property improvement, deferred maintenance, et cetera. That $450,000, that's all subordinated unsecured debt. So, so it's essentially an equity shift of that $450,000, and again, down payment equity into the community over time as they invest. But our investors now own those 200 plus families own a building that's worth, we just have it appraised every year, $2,050,000, and we bought it at 1.2 million. So there's a lot of net worth sitting there that's going to get transferred to those families over time when they cash out, or ultimately when we close it. Our role now is to act as advisors to the board of directors and help manage the property management and keep the business operating. But other than that, you know, it's completely a community-driven, community-led model, and that's what we see happening in other communities. You know, it's not us managing down, but we're given access to a platform that then is completely locally led.
Right. So there are some, and I just want to just illustrate this. There are some that say that, you know, and some of my, you know, work around this, you know, that there's a capitalist lens and a social lens that are at play here. Okay. Yeah. And so there are purists on one end, and those that understand, you know, how all of these various mechanisms might work to the benefit and the outcomes that we're all driving towards. You know, I'm curious more about that, because, you know, my lens is really looking at all of the above and trying to figure out what's the best way to leverage the interaction of this. But I do think ultimately the equity gain is a private sector framework, if you will, in terms of equity outcome. And so that's ultimately what we want to do within communities. But again, it's a struggle in terms of, you know, the way that community might view it. You had indicated sometimes things are a little less sophisticated. That's at least in terms of their understanding of what these things are. What is investment? What is dividend? How do I participate? How do you make it practical for people? Because I see that in a lot of the spaces that I'm having conversations about, people are in their lanes of their understanding, and in the context of their work, they're absolutely correct about it. But on the other side of the equation, absent information about how to leverage that in another space is often not present, and makes it very difficult from a community building standpoint to kind of focus in on. I'm curious about your experience around it.
Well, yeah, I'm sure Dominique has experience with this too. You know, people are ardent with what they know and what they want to get out of a project, which is great. So the most important person in the room ends up being somebody like you, Keith, which is the pragmatist that can kind of say these multiple objectives can be met, but we need to coordinate and give up a little territory here and a little bit there. Our model can maintain affordability, much like a community land trust does, but that's a function of really how we capitalize a project. In our case, we bought the building 6 years ago on December 18th with no path to sell it. I had a board that was thankfully 100% behind the vision. So we knew the property was going to be worth 1.43 million because of an appraisal, if we just cleaned it up and leased it up. So that's what we did. So we had some equity cushion that allowed some net worth to exist before we launched it. If we were to launch that same building today, we would have gone to a foundation or philanthropic sources to put a base of equity to make the math move, work. And capitalization is a key to make these happen, because you need a bank always, and you need the equity capital, and the combination of that dynamic looks different in every city.
Yeah, that's
Dominique, about your, right, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're at that point where we're trying to provide gap funding to the business owner who wants to purchase a commercial asset. And the funding that we raise will go into the equity of that land and bringing down the commercial loan price value that they would need to take out, making it then affordable to that business owner to be able to purchase it. We also understand that if a business owner is not able to come with that financing, then we will finance it along with still putting some, equity through, raising money towards that, but provide a lease to own option to where over a period of time, they can pay down that loan and then be able to repurchase the building from us. And so again, it's that long-term affordability, because we're still able to keep their rent affordable, or at least a little bit below market value while they're leasing to own, while at the same time, they're able to pay down that loan. And so that's our goal, but we have to have those philanthropic dollars to be able to offset that financing. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's one of the things that also, I began to think through this as well is, how does this become a sustainable proposition? And I think that's the challenge for everyone, community land trusts or any kind of mechanism, is again, the complications of sustainability. Even when I think about, again, we've got a number of wonderful organizations dealing with housing issues. We've got wonderful organizations dealing with economic development issues. We've got wonderful organizations around education and wealth building, knowledge building around wealth, et cetera, et cetera. And it really is trying to bring people around the table to kind of really understand the ecosystem in a really, really important way and how the ecosystem functions. And John, it sounds a little bit like, considering the model that you were able to emerge, that's really what you had to do and what you're probably helping other communities to do at this point, is really understand the assets. But I do see that, people do approach this, because you have to understand in Minnesota, I'll just set the context of this. Minnesota, we've got a nonprofit sector. We've got a private sector. We've got a philanthropic sector, okay? And I really am intentional about the way that I lay it out, because these are industries, if you will, to a large extent. And we've got a public sector. And so within that, people get in their lanes and see their responsibility for addressing community needs or leaning in and so on and so forth. So it gets really a little bit complicated because people have defined themselves and their response to communities in very intentional ways for the right reasons and with the right outcomes, perhaps not looking at the kind of interface between them and the opportunity of space to work more collectively to leverage. So I do see that as going to be a real important challenge. And that's a little bit of why we're kind of fortunate, at least, not to have anything but a blank canvas. But at the same time, there's also another counter to that. You don't have a tangible object for people to rally around either.
That's challenging.
like a building that says, well, how would you like to own that? So it's really one of those
Yeah.
situations where I can see certainly the benefit of having an asset already established. So we'd have to model it somehow using some kind of real tangible opportunity.
Yeah.
I think that early in the development process, when things are going to happen, whether it's focused on creative space or green space or things that can actually induce and gentrification, and we've seen this happen in a number of cities. Atlanta, there's a particular example, and some others. And gentrification doesn't have to be a bad thing, and sometimes it's hard to stop. But you can put in mechanisms for affordability, CLTs, et cetera. And we're starting to make the contention that getting people engaged in an ownership path in the neighborhood that is going through some changes, whether it's gentrification or other positive changes, having them, as investors, that's compatible with the other things aside from the commercial retail space, is something that induces action from them and commitment. So, for instance, outside the financial performance of the building, which definitely needs, is the basis from which the investment works, the most heartening, inspiring thing that we've discovered is we track income, we track the performance of, number one, the property, the investors, are they happy? And does it perform well? Do the tenants do better? And are they happy that they're community owned? That's happening. But the third one was looking at neighborhood health, wellness, and engagement. And so we survey people when they sign up, and then every year, do you vote? Do you engage your voice in the neighborhood? Do you activate your voice for what you're concerned about? And what are you concerned about? And 2/3 of the investors say they're more active in the neighborhood after becoming an investor than they were before. And we asked why. They said, because we own something. We own the neighborhood. Like, ownership drives more engaged citizenry. That was an aspiration that we kind of had, like, let's see if this happens. But it did, and it does, and it continues. And that's, that's what gets me up in the morning. That's what's exciting.
Well, we do have a question in the chat. For people interested in supporting land trusts, what does that look like, and how can we best get involved?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, the thing that I can say, and again, I'm certainly no expert in the land trust. I know the Rondo Land Trust is an important fixture in the community. I also believe that, certainly Frogtown Neighborhood Association, Model City, there are Aurora St. Anthony, there are a number of community development organizations within the community. So I guess in my mind, it's really first stepping in and having conversations with those that already exist within your ecosystem to understand kind of how they're organized and how they function and what their ultimate mission is and how they go about approaching that mission. Once that happens, then it's a matter of really asking the question, are there opportunities? Because I've seen models out there where there are opportunities, not only for those that are the property owners, if you will, but also for outside people to invest in as well what's going on within the community. And so there's some level of acceptance of external resources and investment. It may be managed differently. It may be limited in terms of how that might look for you as a non-owner. But I know those are emerging sustainable models that certainly are being discussed. And that was part of what I was reading, certainly, when I had mentioned Olivia's name, in this equation, because she spoke specifically to that kind of idea. That sometimes it's Olivia Williams in the book or the article, The Problem with Community Land Trusts. She was saying it's about sustainability, and it's about also possibly infusing creative and different kind of resources. So if you're not currently within it, maybe there's an opportunity for investment in it. I don't know.
Yeah, I know for us, and I'm sure this might be the case with other community land trusts, anybody can become a member for $1. And that's a direct way to have an impact within the communities that this, land trust serves. And so you might want to look into, if you're, have local community land trusts in your area, look into becoming a member. And then now you have a seat at the table and you can be a decision maker for what goes on in that area.
Yeah, good point. Good point indeed. So again, one of the questions for me again is scalability. I'm sorry, I see you, Kris.
No problem. So I want to just jump in quick to let our attendees know that we are in our last type 20 minutes. The conversation is going great, but if they have anything they want to ask, I would just open it up now for them to start putting those in the chat so that you guys can get those answered before our time is up today.
Great, great. So what I really am interested in is scalability. Certainly there are examples and individual examples that you can point to. John, your illustration is really a pretty powerful one. I think the one, Dominique, that you're working on right now, you know, I feel instead of a panelist, I'm kind of facilitating, but excuse me for that, because I'm just trying to extract the gaps and the pieces that I know we're hearing. And I know probably likely the audience has some curiosity around, just as I do myself. But when I think about this as well, how do you scale it up? Are we waiting 10, 15, 20 years, you know, for real community impact to take place 30 years from now? Will we be able to see it in our lifetime? Are the models that are currently out there ones that are going to get us there quickly? What is it going to take? Because to me, I know I hear a lot of folks saying, I can't wait another 5 years. I'm living day to day. I can't wait another 20 years to figure out how my whole life can kind of emerge with some ownership and some connection to that. I'm curious about your thoughts.
Well, I know like we're trying to model after what the City of Lakes Community Land Trust has been doing for over 17 years and has been very successful. They're one of the younger community land trusts in Minnesota, but the largest in the country. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at over 300 homes within that time frame. And I think what it is because it's a one-time investment for an investor. So if they've, I think, been able to leverage $10 million over the past 17 years to where now there's a portfolio of estimated $50 million that has become of equity through these properties. And so they're able to remain sustainable without having to go back to ask any more money. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one of the ways that they've been able to scale it. And that's what we're trying to do, is be able to take a one-time investment and stretch that over 99 years.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah. Keith, our vision is not to do one good project in Portland and go home. But we always had the vision to build a platform that'll work in other communities in unique ways, with some set true north of really driving family wealth. Maintain affordability of the commercial retail space as well can be done, but have each community utilize the platform that we've had, all of our learning and the intellectual property, all the stuff that legal path to do this even has never been done before. But we want to share it. And our vision, I'll just say it because I'm not shy about it now, is to touch 1 million people in 100 cities in the next 5 to 10 years. But that's going to take more than my staff of 3 right now to do. Sure. So we're out fishing in the waters for some capacity building funding, and we've got a queue of really great cities and great people interested in and wanting to consider how to localize and make it their own. So I think we're on a good path. And I hate saying that there's any benefit of COVID, but it woke up people. George Floyd woke us up if we weren't woken up before. Certainly a lot of us were, but those negative occurrences have catalyzed interest and action that is upon us to take.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing us back home a little bit too, because I know, Dominique, you had mentioned a little bit earlier about the stats, implied some of the stats for Minnesota. We're the second best state to live in the country. Affordability, the economy, healthcare, and so on. But for African Americans, we're ranked 4th worst. And on top of that, for people of color across the board, we're 50th in the nation. So we have all the assets, we have all the resources to do and to be innovative and creative. And I would bet that if we can determine, how to use our collective genius and our collective resource, we can create some real important impact here. No question about that. So I just wanted to get to that reality check, because we're mentioning certainly Mr. Floyd, but Mr. Floyd is a representation of the challenges that people are facing in so many you know, I guess we only have about 20 minutes, it sounds like, or 15 minutes remaining. And I know there probably was one other, kind of question out there, Dominique, and that really is centered around kind of our own personal thoughts, what we're doing currently in the space, what do we anticipate ourselves doing as we move forward. I think John probably kind of alluded to it in terms of the number of reach, the amount of reach, and scaling up his office. And I'm hoping that you get some more funding, John, to do that. And oh, by the way, something triggered in my mind. You were in the Eco District conference, were you not?
I was, yeah.
And you were on the panel. So as I'm listening to you talk, I know you and I met really briefly there, and I was quite intrigued.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to extending and continuing this conversation as well. But anyways, getting back to the question, at hand, it really is, one of them is, what do these models look like in different cities? And certainly that's the case in racial equity. But I think the other one really is share a bit about, where you're leading, where you're heading, what your partnerships are, and then finally, any closing next steps, or what is needed for success. So I'm gonna pass it on to one of you to kind of go ahead and jump in, and then I'll jump in thereafter.
Yeah, so I can talk to what we have going on. Very excited about 2021. And so we are currently partnering with a cooperative organization called Northside Investment Cooperative Enterprise, short for NICE, Minnesota NICE, to repurchase 3 commercial properties along 35th and Penn from the Twin Cities Land Bank. And so all the current commercial tenants are Black-owned businesses. And we are also working with the city of Minneapolis to gain exclusive development rights on a property that they own in South Minneapolis. And our plan is to identify and establish an established business to partner with on purchasing the buildings. And I have learned that there is a huge interest right now in community ownership and commercial land trusts after everything that's taken place in the Twin Cities. And so people are waking up, and like he said, and they are realizing that we got to do something different, and are now starting to look into that community ownership. We are also partnering with organizations that provide technical assistance to small businesses and other economic development organizations locally. We are developing a referral system and working to streamline processes and programming for businesses who are interested in the land trust model. And so we want to get businesses prepared to own commercial real estate. That's a whole nother beast. And in a lot of the commercial real estate that we're looking at, they have residential units above them. So not only are they owning commercial space, they're going to become landlords as well. And so we want to be able to set them up for success and not for failure. So again, the next steps is to begin identifying business owners, building our membership, as well as educating the community on the community ownership model. And for us to be successful, we need business owners who are willing to participate in our pilot program. We also need funding. And the Hennepin County, they just gave us some funding last week, we found out. And so we're grateful for that. And that's to move forward with this 35th and Penn project. But we also, have to raise a lot of, grant funding to make the project work. And we're not able to just rely on financing as traditional developers have been able to do. So we have to look for low interest loans or PRIs and things like that. And so, but a lot of great things coming. So I'm very excited about that.
I want to say first that, thanks to Center for Economic Inclusion for pulling me into this with Keith and Dominique. This is quite an honor, and it's been really fun. I'm super inspired by, as soon as we hang up, let's see, in 25 minutes, we're going to wrap up our feasibility study with Kansas City. And, each one of these cities we're learning from. And as we build up an aggregation of cities that all look different, may approach this a little different, neighborhoods are not the same anywhere in the country. They've all got their own flavor and character, that we're going to build really a network we refer to it as a community of practice, where we all get smarter by working together, and we share what works, what doesn't, between, Memphis, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Fresno, Portland, and And we all get better as we build these wealth building, long-term wealth building paths for people that also engage them and their families in the neighborhood more widely. So, the prospects for us are super exciting. And, when you're stuck at home, to get on a Google Earth and map and be moving from Kansas City to neighborhoods in Milwaukee, it's kind of a vicarious travel. It's not as fun as going to a place and having barbecue in Kansas City, but it still kind of gets me and my team out of our Portland mindset and into the wider nation.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to kind of staying connected with the two of you. I mean, certainly you're right across the river, Dominique, so I'm going to be in your neighborhood. In fact, I'm doing some work to help support some of the rebuild effort over on West Broadway, and I've been engaged also Midway and Lake Street, who are also impacted by what's going on. So I try to keep an understanding of what's happening and learning from that. But certainly, John, pleasure also to hear from you and the model. And I think there's some opportunity to bring both of you over to the Rondo side to just start to really put forward some conversations around this. In fact, recognizing that we're dealing with the Department of Transportation, we're dealing with the city of Minneapolis, or city of St. Paul rather, Ramsey County, and Met Council. So part of our challenge is getting those three agencies rallied around a large public works project. And as we rally them around a public works project, the question is how does this present an opportunity to create a space for an economic engine for African Americans and to the benefit and connection to those other communities within Rondo today? So that really poses a great challenge for us, but I think we see it as an opportunity, again, because we've got a blank canvas and we can take the ideas that certainly have been shared here. The other thing that I think would be really interesting, and as a part of our next steps, is this: community engagement is ongoing and continual. You never stop that, and process is really about relationships over on the long term. So we've still got a lot of work ahead of us in that regard. The second thing is, I talked about master planning, having the community kind of own that. So that's part of where we're heading right now as we get into 2021, is the master planning side of the equation. And then we're fortunate enough to win a grant in a partnership with the Urban Land Institute to talk about community ownership models. And so we'll be gathering certainly community and neighborhood groups, those that are in the housing space, those that are in the business incubation space, those that are in the real estate space, those that are in the development space, the financing space, et cetera. And as we began to have a series of workshops to really talk about what does a community ownership model look like for Rondo and the Rondo community. So we're hoping that something incubates out there that'll be pretty powerful. We did finish our feasibility study for the structure. This is a $1 billion proposition in total, $500 million for the structure, or less than $500 million, and $1 billion for potential development on top that the community can kind of seize and gain in its interest. So when I ask the question of scalability, that's what I'm talking about. It's just trying to make sure that we're able to try to get the right mechanisms for that. And so we're looking forward to continuing to do that. And we're so also pleased that we're about to share our past prosperity study. And as I mentioned, what was the loss? What's the transactional value of that loss? And what do we need to do to invest, knowing that that was the loss within Rondo to the tune of about $157 million worth of lost, value for the community. So we're anxious to do that as well. So I appreciate, certainly the two of you, and certainly we're open for any closing remarks as well. But Kris, I see you're on.
I am on. Thank you so much. Again, we have Keith Baker with us, Dominique Jones, and also John Haines with us. We are getting ready to wrap up. However, if I can have you three just one more time introduce your company you're with in a way that the panel or the attendees can connect with you if they would like in our last 5 minutes, please.
Well, I'm with the City of Lakes Community Land Trust. And my name is Dominique Jones. Our website is clclt.org. My email address is my name, Dominique, DOMONIQUE @CLCLT.org. That's the best way to get in touch with me.
For me, thanks, Dominique. InvestCIT.com has everything we do on it now, and my contact information is in there. And I'm open for a call anytime from anyone, anywhere.
Great. So my email address is Keith B, as in boy, at Reconnect, Rondo.com. Certainly we have a new brand and website launch that we'll have the end of this month. If you go to our website right now, it'll be a little bit challenging to see all of the wonderful things we're engaged in, but it'll be up shortly, so just stay tuned. And again, thanks, Kris, for facilitating and organizing, and thanks to the Center for Economic Inclusion. So appreciate this dialogue and opportunity to share as well.
Thank you again. Thank you again, everybody. We are going to conclude this session, but please join us on our main stage for our noon session. Thank you again so much for our panelists, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
You too.
Thank you.